Welcome to the Simply Love Jesus podcast, where we learn what it means to love God and love people. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If this is your first time tuning in or your first time in a long time, what's going on? My name is Caleb, and here in this community, we have a desire to simplify the complicated issues of life and faith. As many of us know, life is complicated. Life is getting very ridiculous right now, and it seems faith is more complicated than ever. But I believe that loving Jesus is simple. I believe that loving Jesus and keeping loving Jesus at the center of all that we do is the answer to all these complicated things in our life and in our world. And so throughout this past several weeks, we've been going through a series called Be Good News. We've been going through a series on what it means for you to practically be in your community to help those who are being oppressed, what it means for you to go into a space that is totally foreign and to learn how you can literally go and be the hands and feet of Jesus and not just create another consumeristic package and call it faith. If you are seeking a community, an online community where you want to just be good news yourself and to create a community, then I encourage you to either to send me a DM so I can invite you into our online community, and together we can continue to grow our faith together. Today, I have an amazing conversation with Jeremy Steele. Jeremy is known online as the Skeptic Pastor. He has done an amazing ministry where he has shown transparency and he has been honest with his faith, honest with things that people tend to sideline when it comes to the Bible, things that people tend to try to explain away or find excuses in other avenues. And Jeremy continues to move forward with honesty and also with grace. And today I am going to have an amazing conversation with him about his new book, which is called Rituals for Heretics. And I'm so excited. I'm going to give Jeremy an opportunity to introduce himself by starting us off with a very simple question. Jeremy, what is fun for you right now? What are you enjoying? Whether it's a movie, a book, whatever it is that comes to your mind.
What is always fun for me is singing karaoke.
Yes.
It is my go-to. I might go tonight. I will definitely be going on Sunday night. It is very rare that a week goes by that I don't sing karaoke, and usually it's more than once.
That is the best. I think that's probably the best answer I've ever heard. What is your go-to song for karaoke?
Well, if you are a regular karaokeer, you have a bunch. So you sort of, I read the room. I try to figure out who's in there, what song will resonate. My first songs are either Smooth by Santana, My Shot from Hamilton, or 3 a.m. by Matchbox 20. And then I've got like 20 other songs that I might pull out for the second round.
I love that. My kind of go-tos whenever I go to karaoke, I have two very different kinds of songs. I love the ones that just get the whole crowd excited and singing. Everyone loves that song. And for me, that is definitely going Backstreet Boys.
That's solid.
It's a classic.
You can't go wrong with Backstreet Boys.
I want that way. Yeah, just like that. Yeah. Oh God, I love it. It's the best.
For sure.
My other
Tell
one
me why.
is so good to get the whole room just pumped up. The other one that I'll do out The Way You Look Tonight. By Frank Sinatra. And so I'll bust that one out as well. Do you have a group of friends that you go karaokeing with, or is it just like you go solo and you just, whoever's there is there?
Well, no, like the karaoke happens every night at my favorite bar that's close to me called Freddy's. And so I tell people it's like gay cheers in that like it's a queer bar, but like half the people are there all the time. And so it's this like beautiful community of people who know each other and care about each other.
Yeah.
And so whenever you walk in, there's a bunch of people you know. And, I live in the DC area, and this bar is close to the place where a bunch of conventions and business meetings happen. So there's always like a crew of people that are here from out of town.
It's really smart networking too. It's a really interesting casual way. Have you ever been, this is kind of sideline, but it's on the same topic. Have you ever been to been on a cruise?
Yes.
Okay.
And I sang karaoke on that cruise as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because my wife and I, we went on a Disney cruise, and that was my favorite thing, was we went to this karaoke night on the Disney cruise. You know, a bunch of adults that are just blasting out Disney songs. They pop back a couple drinks, and it's a good time. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I was not expecting that. I love that. That's a great fun thing to be doing. Well, anyways, I've invited you on because we are going to talk about your new upcoming book. It's releasing the 14th, right?
April 14th.
April 14th. Perfect. Rituals for Heretics, which I had in my notes as it is about, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have that it is about exploring how ancient practices can enrich you or build you up spiritually and even psychologically. Is that how you would summarize it in a sentence, or do you have a different idea?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good place to start for sure.
Well, tell me about when did you, first off, as also an author, when did you start writing this book? Like, how long has this been in the works?
I think I started about a year and a half ago on this. Online, I've got a spiritual community called Not Church.
Cool.
So it grows out of my work as a skeptic pastor, and that that spiritual community is a place where people of all kinds of religious identities and non-identities show up and talk about spirituality, talk about spiritual practices, and from that group, as well as just as a something that people can do online, people can book time with me to explore beliefs, practices, process religious things, and so one of the things that that began to really grow out of that is a sense that people who had lost faith, left the faith, whatever, really did miss rituals, and so I began to develop versions of rituals that I was familiar with that took the explicitly religious part out, so that people could put whatever it is that they believe about God or not back into the ritual. Because the sort of fundamental idea behind this book is that for millennia, humans have been meeting deep psychological needs through religious ritual, right?
Yeah.
And, before there was therapy, before there was any of that, you had religious ritual. And not only that, these rituals have lasted for hundreds or thousands of years and been honed and continued to evolve to be very effective at whatever it is the psychological need, at meeting those psychological needs. And so the reality is that, like, when people don't have faith, aren't sure what they believe, have lost faith, they disengage from these rituals. And what that means is that they lose access to this huge mass of human knowledge that has grown over millennia. And so what I did was I took rituals and meditation practices from a number of different religions and spent the time understanding what was going on psychologically, what need was being met, and then pulled the God, the religion, the explicit religion part out, while leaving the psychological work intact and the main way that work was being done through the ritual. And then people can use the ritual. The book has a page for notes and making the ritual yours. So if somebody wants to add in Jesus language, add in God language, right? The book is meant to really be a collaborative work between the reader and the book.
You tend to just be authentically yourself, which is great. I think that's something
sure.
you encourage within others. I know that, and the reason that I say that is already I was in the back of my mind as I was listening to you talk. I was already thinking, how do you respond to Christians who may want to like push back against what you're teaching and all these things, other religions, other practices, all this other stuff. And then my immediate follow-up thought is, well, he wouldn't care about that. he would just move past that. And it was just, it was a interesting thought in that regard. But at the same time, I think, what did you find, I guess to hone in this question even deeper, did you find within yourself as you explored other religious practices? And did you find yourself have an inner wrestling with how you engage that, what you learned, and even your decisions to include those? Like, what experience did that bring out within yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in the title, right? Rituals for Heretics, right? So in some ways, the book is intentionally heretical. If you come from one of these religious streams, to take those things out is problematic. But for me, the wrestling really was not about any hang-ups about different religions or anything like that. The wrestling with me was, I want people to be able to benefit from all of these rituals. And if you're a person who believes that these rituals help you connect with God, then removing the elements that prevent somebody from engaging in that ritual means that you are giving that person access to the process by which you believe they will connect with God. And so while it might not be something you would do in your own church, I think to push back on people that are like, why would you do that? Well, if you believe that I don't know, communion helps people connect with God, why would you not want more people to be able to engage in the practice of communion who couldn't do it in its current form because it's triggering for them, because they have deep religious trauma around Christianity or even communion. And so for me, the wrestling was with how can I make this closest to the original ritual, while also making it accessible to as many people as possible. Because, a lot of, it's really interesting when you look at ritual, and so each chapter starts with a religious explanation, like what was going on in the religious ritual, the original ritual, and then a psychological explanation. And like, I'm not talking about like a psychological explanation of what Jeremy thought, but like legit psychological background. Like, for example, when a space that you live in holds pain, right? And so the psychological piece is contemporary psychological research confirms the impacts of rituals like this. According to studies in trauma therapy and cognitive neuroscience, symbolic physical gestures, especially those involving movement, scent, and multisensory focus, can create real changes in the way memories are encoded and recalled. Burning or releasing a symbol tied to a painful memory allows the brain to reprocess the emotion, reduce its intensity, and create an embodied sense of closure. Smell, in particular, is deeply tied to memory through the olfactory bulb, which connects directly to the amygdala and hippocampus, centers of emotional memory and learning. This is why certain scents can trigger powerful memories. So like, so it starts with the religion. It gives you the psychological background. And then you go in it. And one of the things as I was researching this is I found so many rituals that are very similar from religion to religion, right? So this ritual is a ritual that is similar similar. It's based in the idea of smudging. I don't know if you're familiar with smudging.
I'm not. Explain that.
So smudging is like you take herbs or something like that, and you burn the herbs, you release the smoke, and then you go and the smoke sort of helps you spiritually cleanse the space. This is something that you find in like Native American First Nations people, but it's found in all kinds of indigenous cultures. You can find this in hoodoo and voodoo. You also can find this in the Catholic Church. Right. Their use of incense.
Yeah.
There's some rituals involving incense that has the exact same focus.
Yeah.
And so, so what's interesting is that these core, or what was fascinating to me is these core things, these core actions were found, you could find them all over different religious traditions, which I think reinforces this idea that this is this mass of human knowledge that is meeting real psychological needs. And for thousands of years, humans have been discovering, the smoke and the smell and going through and processing these memories, that actually helps, right? And whether you want to say that is like the Holy Spirit coming and entering into this place of intention and bringing healing, or it's an energetic release from the fire and the smoke, or whatever, whatever spirituality you want to put into it, the act is still helpful and effective, like on its own.
I find it really fascinating on two notes. One is the note that for those who may be listening, something that you can take away. And if there are people out there who struggle with the idea of engaging in spiritual practices from other religions, and you're like, well, why would I even test that? And some people may get very like whatever and skeptic. Yeah. And I would say to that is the idea that to be encouraged that all truth is God's truth. And I think the idea is that if we have the opportunity to learn something from someone else, from someone's experience, and if you can engage with that and see it in a way that it actually grows your own spiritual life, then that is something that can be worth exploring. It actually, I would say, is a challenge to have a more secure faith or a more secure belief. And I guess secure may be the wrong word, because I actually believe uncertainty is a great place for us to live in. And then the second note, even on the psychological side, it calls back to me on this recent study that I was reading about the vagus nerve, and how a lot of times stress, anxiety, a lot of these things are triggered by an imbalanced vagus nerve. And studies have found that things that balance the vagus nerve are things like humming, or like singing, dancing, prayer, meditation, like these, the same kinds of things that we associate with worship, or the same kinds of things that actually balance the vagus nerve and allow you to literally quiet your soul, for lack of better words. Yeah. And I think that that's such a beautiful reflection and a great example that you've provided.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, going back to what you said earlier, people that are concerned with like engaging in a religious ritual of some other religion, I'd say that what I've done is actually taken the religion out of the ritual.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know a lot of people who will fight me on this, and that is fine. Yeah. That you do not have to buy the book, but since I've removed the religious part out, it means that you can put whatever it is that you believe into it. If you want to make Jesus and the Holy Spirit be the focus of this ritual, great, do that. Because I think that what changes from religion to religion is the sort of object. Maybe not the object, the means by which you are understanding that this healing is happening, or whatever. And so if for you this is inviting the Holy Spirit into your house, as you walk around and process the difficult things that have happened in your home, that's great. The smudging thing doesn't, like it could be just like a Catholic bringing incense.
Yeah.
Right. As much as it could be a First Nations person wrapping sage and doing that. And so I think, what I would say to people is that, like, I know a lot of people who will come up with their own rituals, right? Their own prayer practice, their own, like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. And then that will be a religious ritual for them that they have made. And, if they're Christian, like, it's going to be like a Jesus focused thing. So this is really no different than that. It's just giving you a palette to start from.
I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. When in this book, is there a particular practice that motivated you to write more than maybe others? Was there one that's particular? Like, obviously, you said each chapter highlights a different kind of practice and its psychological, even spiritual benefits. But was there one that, like, in the back of your head, you're like, but this is the one I want people to really read?
Yeah. So it's interesting that the book is divided into two sections. It's like rituals and meditation practices. So there's like 12 meditation practices that are drawn from different traditions as well, including Christian traditions. There's like a deep history of Christian mysticism, the Desert Fathers, all kinds of beautiful meditation practices that I pull out of that. The Ignatian Examen is in there, but the ritual that really probably sparked the whole thing is somebody that is very dear to me, who is a dual citizen of Mexico and the United States. I participated in the Ofrenda, creating an Ofrenda for Dia de los Muertos. And this is it's just so beautiful. Like, you create this colorful table with all of these beautiful symbols. Like, there's always butterflies and mums and well, not mums, it's something else, I can't remember, but and then you put pictures of the people that you love that have passed, and you put food that they loved, and you're not doing it, at least I wasn't doing it as some sort of like mystical offering to the ancestors. It's very similar
to like the Day of the Dead.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's about honoring your ancestors, keeping their memories alive, it has a very deep, rich history. That's incredible.
And so and then you light candles and you sit around and tell stories of these people, and it's such a beautiful way to. It's not just, and the thing is, and this is what rituals do. It's not just remembering those who have passed. Rituals bring weight and symbol and sensory things into an act of like remembering people you love who have passed, that makes it much more potent. And so in the book, you've got the ofrenda, and again, it doesn't say to get skulls and like whatever, right? But it says, like, you gather some people together, you have them bring a picture, you have them bring something to eat that person liked, and you make it all on a big table, and then you go around and you tell the name of the person and what the food is. And then you eat, and over dinner, you just share stories with the candles and the whole thing. And so when I got to experience that for the first time, it was very moving to me. I've grown up in the church world. I've done all kinds of ritual. I've explored all kinds of different things. This was my first time with that ritual. And it was so powerful that I was like, that's when I think that's the thing that like said, okay, more people need to have access to this.
I love that. That's really cool. So you said that's probably the one you were most excited for people to read. Is that also the one that you feel like personally affected you the most? Or is it maybe a different way to ask this? is that also the same practice that you feel like has grown your faith the most?
No, for that, I think it's some of the meditation
Yeah.
practices. So I have ADD. I'm not good at clearing my mind or sitting still or focusing. And so when I first tried meditation, I felt like I was a failure at it, right? And since then, I've actually gotten better at that style of meditation. But just sitting there and trying to blank out your mind is not helpful, right? But there's what I tell people, because I'll do meditation coaching with people, is we'll have a conversation and I'll find out like what gets them into a flow state, what gets them into that like really wonderful, sense of transcendence or focus or whatever. It might be music, it might be art, it might be writing, all of those things. And once you understand sort of your own personality, there are actual meditation practices that capitalize on that personality piece. So like if you're a person who really likes visual art, there's a practice called icon gazing from the Orthodox traditions, right? Now, they have a whole theological concept of these icons actually not just being paintings, but windows into a deeper reality. That's not something that's helpful for people who are not Orthodox. But the practice of icon gazing, when you sort of take that theological piece out and you use a piece of artwork that resonates with you, can help you enter into a deep meditative state without trying to like blank out your mind with no sensory, right? There are some people that really love to walk, and they're very active people. There's an entire style of meditation that comes from the Buddhist tradition that is called walking meditation, and it's focusing on paying attention to the sensations in your feet and walking intentionally, and it's fantastic. And again, it doesn't involve you sitting still, closing your eyes, and trying to think of nothing, right? And so for me, I think the things that have grown me the most is some of the meditation practices, because my world is so busy, my mind is so crowded that that finding ways to let go and connect with the divine, connect with God, without more stimulation, has been really profound.
Have you found that, or have you used some of these practices in your online community? And have you
Yeah.
found that what's been the fruit of that?
People really love to experiment with them. You'll get to the end of, so we do Zooms twice a week, and we're on this sort of rotation of different focuses, but spiritual practices is a regular focus. So we've done a number of these meditation practices together. And so when you get to the end of it, people will say, I like this. This didn't work for me. And that's great, because the idea that like something can work for you, something else can't work for you, is this permission giving orientation towards things like meditation, where you're not trying to make whatever it is work because this always works, right? You get to explore and find the things that actually work for you, because everybody has different brain chemistry. Everybody has different, there's something called absorption, right? Absorption is the likelihood that you will be able to sort of take in and feel like you are caught up in something bigger. So people who have high absorption are the people who raise their hands and cry and worship all the time, right? Because their brain is primed to take that stuff in. The people with high absorption are also the people that are easily hypnotized. And so that means that there are certain practices for people with high absorption that work great for them. Somebody who doesn't have that, the worship service with the band and the very emotional, all the things, not going to resonate with them, not going to work. And yet for somebody who is more like intellectual, that has lower absorption, like deeply studying a sacred text can be way more effective at helping them sense spiritual connection than worship music and a preacher.
That makes me think of a great question, actually. When it comes to someone who may be listening to this right now, how can somebody help? You mentioned like absorption and somebody like at different levels of absorption, and maybe you talk about this in your book. How is it that somebody can identify the what connects with them, or discover more about themselves to then figure out more different disciplines to explore?
Sure. So when I get on a Zoom call with somebody that I'm working with who wants to find ways to connect with God, or feels like they've never been able to connect with God or whatever, I'll ask them to think back in their past. When is a time, or when are times where they either felt a deep sense of the presence of God, felt like they were fascinated by spirituality, or just experienced a sense of transcendence, of this sort of like magical rising above your current circumstances. And then you listen to the stories, and the stories will tell you about who you are. I was talking to somebody, and they were telling me about like like they went to what was it? They went to a Metallica concert, and then they went to a Lady Gaga concert, and they were talking about all of these like very spiritual experiences in concerts, but not just in the concerts. When they listen to the music at their house, right? Well, clearly, music is something that helps you get into that, and so we need to explore different ways to use music, right? There are other people who are very outdoors, and like, yes, I hate sitting in a pew, but every time I walk into the forest, I feel like I'm being filled with the energy of the forest, or I'm experiencing the presence of God in a powerful way. And so when you hear those stories, then you say, oh, okay. So nature practices are really important for you. Those are the things that really connect. And so that's where I think what often happens is that when people have gone to church for their whole lives, depending on what tradition that they grew up in, that tradition labeled some number of things as the ways that you can connect with God, right? Sometimes it was prayer, Bible study, and worship, right? Those are the three things. But if you are super distracted, if you don't really enjoy music or public, lectures, and if you and if you're not a person that is like enjoying studying, right, then you will sit in that religious tradition and feel like you can't connect with God, right? And so a lot of people that I talk to come in and present with this like, well, I never did really connect with God, right? And the more you talk, once you can let go of the very narrow set of things you were told could connect you with God and open yourself up to the idea that you might have been connecting with God through some other means, all of a sudden people are like, well, yeah, you know what? This thing that I really experience, what people talk about experiencing in worship, I do that, but it's sitting at a tree, right? Yeah. I experienced that, but it's when I'm going to an art museum or when I'm protesting, right? Yeah. So I'd say to people who are wondering that, look back on your story, on your life, delete the narrow number of categories you were told that counted as far as ways to connect with God, and look for transcendence, right? Look for moments where you experienced being connected to something larger than yourself, and you will find you'll probably find a pattern, right? You'll find some common thread that can help lead you to um to engaging in practices on a regular basis that help you connect with God, and letting go of feeling the pressure to only connect with God in the one or two or three things that you told counted.
Right, because it's on one hand, it's also not just connecting with God, it's also an opportunity to connect with people. And in its own way, I mean, for Christians listening, the way that you connect with God is by connecting with people. Hence the greatest commandment. But I wonder, what does it say? I'll use myself as an example. What does it say about somebody when, like, for me, that moment of transcendence, the first images that come to mind as I was listening to you explain this, it was the image of, you mentioned sitting by a tree. For me, it's sitting by the ocean, and sitting at the beach. But also, I find the times that I feel most connected with God is when I am specifically when I'm talking with people and I'm listening to people's stories and I'm engaging in uncomfortable ideas, like the ideas that
Mm-hmm.
make people uncomfortable. I actually thrive. That's where, and when you test the boundaries, or you ask the deeper the question, that moment when your head just like swells and you're almost like you're breaking through different ideas that you didn't think were okay or right or whatever it may be. And those are the moments where I feel like I've always found the most level of transcendence, for lack of better words. And I wonder what your thoughts
Yeah.
would be on that for someone like myself.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a common experience, a common way of people experiencing transcendence. It's with other people, right? And so, because that's not everybody, right? Not everybody has that relational dynamic to their pattern. And so so what I would say is, like, part of the rituals, the meditation practices, what transforms them from just lighting something on fire to a transcendent experience is intention, right? Going into these places, into these moments, um, with the intention of whatever it is, but of connecting with the divine, connecting with God, right? Going and so when we're talking about conversations, it's not just about, just talking about random stuff with your friends, right? It's about going into a conversation, like what makes that a ritual, what makes that it can even be a meditative type of practice, is to go into those conversations with the intention of, this is something that I believe God is going to use to help me connect with God, right? But it also, I would say, for people who have a story like yours, it means that other rituals, other practices are going to be primed for you when you share them with other people, right? So you talked about sitting at the ocean. So like nature rituals, doing them by yourself might be fine, but doing them with another person will probably make that much more impactful, and feel like you have much easier access to the spiritual side of what's going on.
I love that. Well,
I feel like I'm doing a psychic reading or something.
it's great. No, I love it. I think that's incredible. We only got a shorter time left, and so I want to kind of give you some space to share, and you can take this whatever direction you want. But is there anything on your heart that you just that's been pressing for you to share, whether it's related to your book or maybe not related to your book? But is there something specific that's been pressing on your heart today that you would like to share with anyone who's listening?
I just think I want to say to people, there are people in your life that don't go to church, that maybe don't believe in God, or just say like, I believe something, I don't know what, but they won't go to church, right? They won't go to your Bible study or to your small group meeting at your house or whatever. And we have, you can have this sense that in order for you to get them to have a relationship with God, you've got to get them to church. And let me tell you, my life every single day is working in spiritual conversation and spiritual community with people who 9 times out of 10 say, I will never go to church. Don't try to get me to go to church. It's not happening. There are people who have been abused in church buildings by pastors. There are people who have been traumatized as children when they were forced to watch a film about the rapture, which is something that was invented by a guy in the 1830s. There are people who, as children, were subjected to horrifying sermons about burning for eternity. There are people who have real deep trauma that just walking over the threshold of a church is a non-starter. Like literal PTSD. They would have flashbacks. They would have dissociation. They would have all of these things. And there's all kinds of levels of that. And so what I think I want to say is, if church works for you, I'm really happy. I think that's great, and I love that for you. But I think that if people can't go to church, my experience is the people who used to go to church and no longer do and say they can't ever go back, it's my fault. It's your fault. It's the church's fault. And the thing that is one of the truths that I hold deepest in my soul is that if God exists and people cannot go to church because of the church, but yet they still want to engage in spirituality, I don't think God cares what method they use, right? And so what I think I want to say is like, let them off the hook, right? don't feel like the pressure is on to get them to show up to church when they're never going to, and to lose out on relationships with people because you're constantly putting that pressure on them. And instead, I think I just want you to validate whatever experience they might have of God. If they say that, like, church, I'm not going to church, but when I go fishing, that's a thing, I want you to celebrate that with them. I want you to be like, yeah, that's God. I'm glad you found something that works for you, right? Because if you're a Christian, if you believe in the Holy Spirit, if you believe in the Christian precepts that are held in the Bible, going to church will not fix anybody. That is God's job. That is the Holy Spirit's job. And if church is getting in the way of of God fixing those people, I think God's going to fix them outside of the walls. And so we should also not be part of that barrier. I think that's what I'd say.
I think that's beautiful. I think it also speaks to the fact that if someone's not okay with that, maybe it's time for them to consider that they're putting God in a box.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a beautiful word. Well, as we get ready to wrap up, Jeremy, where is it that people can find you? And most importantly, also, how is it that the listeners of this podcast can be good news to you?
Yeah.
Book obviously being
Facebook.
The big one. Book obviously being the
for
big
sure.
one.
Yeah, Rituals for Heretics. The book before this was How to Not Suck as a Christian. Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, Skeptic Pastor. If you are interested in the spiritual community like I talked about, or I'd say especially if you know somebody who like is interested in spirituality but can't church anymore, it's called Not Church, and a lot of us have religious trauma around being manipulated out of money in churches, and so we don't do donations. It's $3 a month, and if it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. And if anybody ever needs to get in for free, you can just DM me on a social media platform, and I'll get you in for free. But you go to patreon.com/skepticpastor for that. And I have a podcast where I interview all kinds of interesting people, theologians, academics, politicians, and do my own Bible teaching and stuff from time to time. That podcast is called Unbelief.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much again, man. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb.
It's been real fun.
It's always good to be with you.
I'm really excited to read your book. I'm really excited to check it out. Is it going to be available like everywhere, like Amazon? Is it
everywhere you want?
Yeah.
And if you want to,
is it available
get
in bookstores?
Personalized, yeah, bookstores. Like you won't find it on the shelf probably, but you can order it from a bookstore.
Yeah.
And if you want to like signed, personalized copy, and to for me to get more than like 50 cents off of the sale, you can go to skepticpastor.com/rituals and you can order one there.